Hi, I'm YouTube phenomenon and international supermodel Mia Mulder. There seems to be a lot of transgendering going on in the world, and I figured that I should talk about that in the way that I can, as a trans woman. The question that so many have asked is how to pass as a woman. Before I can answer that question, there are things we need to talk about, and we also need to talk about what that even means. I've been transitioning now for over 6 years, and during that time I have not just become a woman, but a babe. I had my humble beginnings in the ancient year of 2012, the year the world ended. In the before times I looked like this. Ugh. Now I can look like this, and I will teach you how to do the same. And of course it all starts out somewhere. Transitioning. When I began my transition, it was a grueling process to even understand that I could do it. It was hard for me to understand that I could be a woman. But I think a lot of people underestimate how many layers society places on you about how women should be. Obviously, cis women know this a lot more than cis men, but there are experiences, I think, that no cis person can really experience or understand. My specific experience was a mixture of my own life and my own desires and the demands of society and the people around me. The impression I got was that I basically had to conform to the standards of a 1950s housewife who would readily submit herself to the desires of a man. Erotic. My own views on identity and gender were simple in comparison. I didn't really think about it that much. I never really deconstructed myself. I didn't gaze within myself to see my inner soul. I, like many people, simply thought that I would be happier if I transitioned. And now I am. And sometimes that sounds sad. And sometimes that is sad. And that's actually fine. It's actually fine. I'm fine. Sarah, on the channel Let's Talk About Stuff, talked really intimately about what transition means. But this video isn't really about that. And if you really want to grasp the existential horror of transitioning, I really recommend that video. But transitioning is not the point of this video. You want to find out how to pass. And I will tell you. I'm not here to tell you about the terrifying realities of coming to terms with transitioning. At least, that's not the focus. My focus is more about the expectations laid upon you during transition. Today, compared to 6 years ago, we have a slightly more varied and nuanced view on gender. We know that gender doesn't have a sexuality or a fashion style. I don't have to act like a 1950s housewife who would readily suck dick on demand. Although I will. But we still have a concept of passing, frequently meaning that you pass in the eyes of society as the gender you identify as. When people look at you, they will assume that you are the gender that you are, and then you pass. To pass is the goal of many trans people and the goal of many transitions. It is also a barrier society places on you if you want to be an acceptable trans person, especially for binary trans people. But I'll dig into what I mean with that a bit later. Passing obviously means different things in different contexts and different societies. But in the discourse, there's an idea that passing is something that you don't have to do right now. But there's an idea that you should, eventually, as long as you take your hormones like a good little tran. And you can see why a lot of people who feel that they can't pass have issues with this idea in the discourse. Obviously, you can have any reason you want to pass. I want to pass. I think a lot of people do. Some people want to pass for safety concerns, in order to avoid violence or discrimination and the worst parts of transphobia. If they are not seen as transgender, then this is something that they might avoid, and that is very understandable. Some people like me just want to take part in society without having the fact that we're trans be a roadblock in our lives. Everywhere. I only take issue with the discourse bit, not the individual choices bit. At least not that much. But it should be noted that passing doesn't necessarily mean that you're accepted in society. All it does is hide you from people who are hostile to trans people anyway. It doesn't actually make them accept you, it hides you from them. And I grant you that is very understandable. But the only way to win with people who are hostile to trans people is to not be trans. To transcendentally be the gender that you are, in a way that only they can define. Passing or not, at the end of the day, people are still going to legislate against you. And people are still going to refer to chromosomes, and you can't really pass as a chromosome type. When we talk about passing, it's also important to note that it's no coincidence that many of the successful trans people, and many of the trans success stories we hear, are from people who are ostensibly passing. And not just passing, but most often white, and most often have a lot of money in order to fund their transition to a level that most people can only really dream of. But we don't really think about that. We think that they are a success story, and you want to be part of that. And of course you do. They seem to be happy, and you want to be happy too. Eventually, we want to be part of those success stories. We want to be the good trans person. We want to be the trans person that does well, that is an inspiration to others, that wins. To pass in the eyes of society is also a very binary thing. If you don't identify with the binary genders, then what are you supposed to pass as exactly? Passing in general is often in relationship to cis people and cis appearances. For many people, transitioning is a journey from not passing to passing. That is what transition means for many people. And because of that, it doesn't really allow for trans expression. Passing is, in essence, assimilation. A very understandable one, obviously, but nevertheless, it's not something that we define ourselves. It becomes something that we all basically have to exist in relationship to. It ends up becoming this aspiration of a lot of transitions, which is supported by society, media, the doctors, therapists, and other trans people. And we have to respect that passing is important. We do. Love it or hate it, we just have to deal with it. And in that case, we might as well just accept it. Or do we? You could argue that passing refers to the initial impression of someone. If you see someone and you assume that they are the gender they identify as, then they are passing as that gender. And sometimes this is easy, if you conform to the expectations of gender and appearances and beauty and gender roles and everything else. This means that your face looks like it should, your hair looks like it should, your voice sounds like it should, your skin feels like it should. These are fairly high standards. But there's a problem here. Cis people often don't meet those standards either. There are many places now which use bathroom bills, so-called because they regulate who has access to bathrooms. Usually they are meant to force people to go to the bathroom that matches their birth certificate gender, the gender that they were assigned at birth. But the only way to enforce this is to look at appearances. They look visually on who belongs in the bathrooms. Meaning that if you are a trans woman and you don't pass, you might not have access to the women's bathroom. But it's not uncommon in areas like these for cis women to also be excluded from these spaces, because they don't match the expectations of the gender that they are. Cis women who don't conform to stereotypical ideals of appearances are often kicked out of these places as well. But what does passing mean then? How can you look like a gender if a gender doesn't really have a look? Well, while it is often defined as appearing as the gender that you identify as, I think a better definition is not being viewed as trans. And that's a crucial difference. For example, a non-passing trans woman does not by default look like a cis man. That's not really how things work. A non-passing trans woman looks like a non-passing trans woman and will be viewed and treated as such. For the last couple of years, trans awareness and visibility has been on an all-time high, probably more than at any other time in human history. And that's mostly good, I think. But at the same time, it's made people aware of us. People who don't like trans people have been working overtime to try to sniff us out. An example of this are when cis women are often assumed to be trans women, and of course the recent transpiracy, which assumes that all powerful people in the world are actually transgender as a form of a global plot to take over the world or something. Because of this, passing now not only has to contend with ideals of beauty and gendered appearances, but also with cishood. I'll try to explain with an example. When I came out as a woman in 2013, there was probably a period at the start when I had no idea how to be a woman, and probably looked like I didn't know how to do that. But shortly into my transition, things became rather easy. My voice didn't really sound feminine at all. I didn't really look super feminine either, but because I wore feminine coded clothing and I presented myself with a feminine name, people just assumed that I was that gender, even if I didn't match totally. Their view of what trans meant didn't line up with what I looked like, and because of that, I passed. Not because I was beautiful, or because I had a gendered look. Back then I definitely didn't, but simply because I didn't look trans. Their idea of trans was probably this, rather than this. While this is obviously based in ignorance, it worked. And I know that was easy for me. The same probably cannot be said for people who weren't as privileged as I was, or as lucky as I was. Now, however, cis people know that anyone can be transgender. Your friend, your coworker, your boss, your local politician, anyone. And because of that, the mainstream view of what trans looks like has changed. And because of that, some things that might earlier have been explained away with, some women just have a husky voice, today is replaced with, that woman has a very deep-set voice. I wonder. Now I know what you're gonna say. You're gonna say that I pass. And I used to. I definitely used to pass. But I don't anymore. When I go out, I am more misgendered than I am correctly gendered, almost all the time. On camera, with nice lighting and some camera work and some editing, yeah, I probably pass. A little bit, at least. But not totally. And isn't that the point? I haven't changed that much, though. I've gone from passing to not passing, but I haven't changed that much. If anything, I'm more feminine now than I have ever been. I'm more stereotypical now than ever. I'm more comfortable in my own skin. I got some basic makeup skills. I got a fair bit of a fashion sense now. But despite that, I don't pass anymore. Because of the public idea of what trans looks like looks more like me now than it used to. If anything, I conform more to the stereotypes of beauty and gendered appearances than I have ever done. It's just that now, everyone, from transphobe to ally, knows how to spot us. They know the husky voice. They know the tells. they can see the inches of bone. And again, I'm really lucky. I'm a white binary trans woman who already looked kind of feminine when I started. I had an easy time. For people who can't or don't want to pass, this change in perception of what trans looks like has probably hit a lot harder than it has for me. But for me, my own presentation didn't actually matter that much. Society changed much faster than I could. But why do we want to transition then in the first place? If the standards keep changing, then how are we possibly supposed to live up to them? And then why do we keep using this term if the term doesn't really apply and the standards meant to keep it also keep changing? I think passing is a dumb concept. I think it's transphobic. I think it's harmful. I want to make that really clear. But I still want to pass. To be honest, I kind of want to escape living as a trans person, even if it's only in a superficial way. I'm not proud of that. I wish I was immune to the factors that made me feel that way, but I'm not. By not being seen as trans, we avoid some of the hassles of transphobia, at least some levels of it. To pretend, at least for a moment, that everything's fine and that you can take part in society fully. To avoid the terror of existing as a trans person in a world where people and laws and policies would rather that we don't exist. But if we pass, then maybe we're allowed to. But it's not just us who feel that way. Mainstream society also demands of us that we pass. If we pass, then to the people who don't think that we should exist, we don't have to. They don't have to acknowledge our existence. We can be ignored, and we don't have to take up space in their minds to discuss them. As hard as it is to admit, our existence does disgust people. Some trans people too. And if we pass, then we can at least be ignored, or at best tolerated. And I'd rather be tolerated than be an object of disgust. Wouldn't you? I know a lot of people are happy and proud to be trans. I'm sad to admit that I'm not one of them. They probably have a different view on what passing means, and they probably have a better outlook on life than I do. But I don't. And my perspective is very much colored by that. Being trans is something that I really don't want to be. It's something that I am, but I never identified as trans. I identified as a woman, and because I wasn't one, being trans just came with the package. It's a prefix placed on me by the circumstances of my birth. It's not something that I want to be. I haven't reflected that much about my own gender and my identity. I have reflected a lot about my place in society because of my identity and my place as a trans woman in society, but I haven't really considered much of who I am as a gender, at least not until recently. I identify as a woman. I think I kind of look like one, maybe, sometimes, more than anything else really, but does that matter? I remember going to art school a couple of years ago, and it was this like very progressive place compared to where I had been. I'd just gotten my history degree. I had just left this very established world of academia where almost no one is trans. My friends were mostly men, straight, white, because that's what academia was like. But when I came to art school, I was met with a diversity that I had never encountered before. I met more non-binary people in a week starting there than I had ever done in my entire life before. I met more trans people in general than I had ever done before, outside of, like protests and activism things. This was just a school. This wasn't a trans place to hang out, this was just a place. And it was nice. It was full of many different people. And it was filled with people who were similar to me. So when I came there, I figured that I don't have to resort to femininity. I can just wear whatever I want, right? I'm surrounded by trans people. They probably understand. I'm surrounded by feminists for the first time in a long while. They understand. I don't have to conform to gendered expectations here. And I remember walking up to someone and talking, and they asked me for my pronouns. And I had never had that before, not in that genuine context, where they actually wanted to know. And so, I responded a little nervous, yeah, my pronouns are she, her. And I hadn't really done that before. And that felt nice. It felt nice for someone to ask me how I identified, and for me to confirm. And then they responded with, oh, you don't use they, them? Apparently I looked like I was non-binary. They themselves, the person I was talking to, was non-binary. And I didn't really know how to respond. I still don't. When we talk about being transgender or transitioning, we often talk about becoming our inner truths or whatever. Becoming more comfortable with ourselves based on our own view on ourselves. Defining for ourselves who we are. And that sounds really great. But I can't do that. I don't know how. I cannot tell the difference between what I want and what I have been told that I should want. If our bodies and identities were closed systems, then yeah, I think that we could probably define for ourselves what we want that to be. But they're not. They are a part of society and they are influenced by that society. Our identities are shaped, at least in part, by the environments that we exist within, and those environments change even more than we do. Trans discourse is very affirming, validating. You are valid. And that's nice. I have no problem with that. That's nice. It's nice to feel like you're valid. But we do that not because it's something that we feel that we want. It's not something that we just do because it's fun. We do it because we feel like we need it. It's a survival strategy. Society doesn't tell us that we're valid. If anything, society tells us that we're not. We have to counter that. And that is why we do it. But as a consequence of this forced positivity, this forced validation, we don't really talk about the bad things. We don't really talk about the existential horror of identity. And still, despite all of this, we still do it. We still transition, we still affirm each other, we still want to pass, we still do all of these things. Because despite all of the negative things that we don't really talk about, it's worth it. Right? That's why we do it. Transitioning, for me at least, was not really a clear goal of what I had in mind. It was jumping into the void and hoping that I would end up somewhere better. As I mentioned earlier, I haven't really thought about myself and my identity that much. The second I found out that I could be a woman, I cried for hours. And then the very same day, I went online, got some information, and I ordered hormone treatments online. The very same day. I didn't even have to think about it that much. I knew I wanted to be a woman, for as far as I can remember. I just didn't know that I could. But again, I didn't really have to think about it. I never had to reflect on it. It was just part of my life. And we talk about that sometimes. But the more common trope that we hear in mainstream society is, you know, the miserable trans woman who cries in her sleep every night for weeks and months and years on end until she finally accepts herself. Ugh. But why do we, in some capacity, embrace that? Why can't we just sometimes admit that we didn't think about it? We didn't consider the consequences. We just did it and hoped and prayed that it would work. Why don't we just admit sometimes that we jumped into the void hoping for this impossible goal that you can never really reach, that few people ever reach? But we do it because we hope that on the way there, maybe we can find some comfort. Maybe on the way to perfection, the way to the goal that we want to have, we'll be happy. I still identified as a woman, clearly. 6 years later, I'm not sure I still do. Now, I think about it. Now I reflect. Now, more and more, I don't feel comfortable identifying as one. I used to pass. I was happy to identify as a woman then. Now, more and more, I don't feel comfortable doing that. I'm not sure I can identify as a woman anymore. At least not in the same way. I sometimes get the feeling that when people have passing as their transition goal, they're not really talking about looking like a certain gender or avoiding looking like trans at all. I think that many times people just want to be beautiful, but they say it under the guise of self-realization, that if I transition then I can maybe pass, and by pass they mean beautiful. But we know that saying I want to be beautiful, I would give anything to be beautiful, is something that you're not supposed to say. You're not supposed to want to be beautiful. But we do. We know that wanting to be beautiful is a harmful pursuit to dedicate a significant amount of your life to, but sometimes you just do that. Sometimes you just want to. Cis people do that. They do that all the time, so why can't we? Why is it so harmful for us to say sometimes that I just want to be beautiful? We keep saying it's part of our transition and we hide it away in order to excuse it for ourselves. I do that all the time, constantly. When I go out and I ask a friend if I look good, I'm not really asking if I look good. I'm not really asking if my makeup works. I'm not really asking if my eyeliner is sharp. I'm asking several questions at once. I'm asking if I'm beautiful. I'm asking if I'm feminine. And I'm asking if I'm okay. Because on many levels, those things are connected to me. I associate beauty with gendered appearances, and I associate my gendered appearance with my own validity. I feel like society forces a lot of trans people to associate gendered looks with beauty and their own validity with gendered looks. And because of that, we associate our own validity, our own identities to how pretty we are. A lot of people reject this, saying that you can be attractive, you can be beautiful without passing, and that's true. I believe that. When I look at other trans people, I don't associate their gendered appearances with how beautiful they are. And I don't connect that to how valid they are either. But I know cis people do. And I do that to myself. All the time. I agree with the message. 100%. Logically, it's true. But I don't think so. Not for myself. I keep myself to an impossible standard. And I know other people do too. When I first began my transition and I talked to my doctor, I resorted to hyper-femininity. I exaggerated my own feminine traits, my own feminine desires in order to, in the eyes of my doctor who would judge me, feel valid. At the same time I did that, the comfort I had in my own body was destroyed. I didn't feel comfortable at all because despite being a trans woman, I'm not that feminine, and I know I don't have to be, but society thinks that I should. My doctor at the time said that I had to, otherwise I wouldn't get legal recognition or hormone treatments. And I compensated by trying to be beautiful, because if I'm beautiful, then I can be comfortable. Because I would look at other beautiful people and I would think to myself that they must be comfortable constantly. And I ended up judging my body based on how pretty it was, based on how it looked in the mirror, and I succeeded, I guess. By all accounts, I am pretty. I ended up becoming a model even. And despite walking on fashion runways wearing designer clothing, basically living the ideal life of someone who does value their own appearance in that way, I hated myself. I realize now what I really wanted wasn't to be pretty, it was to be comfortable. I wanted to be content being who I was. But we live in a society that tells us over and over and over again to all women that the road to comfort is found in beauty, is found in the exterior, in how we look. And there is comfort to be found there too, right? So there is a grain of truth in it. It's partially true. It's nice to feel cute. It's nice to feel beautiful. But looking good is not just something that we can define for ourselves. As with everything in this video, it's something that is also shaped and influenced by the society we live in and the standards that society has. It's no surprise that what we consider to be beautiful or what we consider to be passing is almost always the same thing that white, straight guys find attractive. I spent a lot of time early in my transition in different web forums talking about how well we passed. We would upload pictures of ourselves and ask people to rank us. How well do I pass? 0 out of 10. And we'd give each other tips. You know, smile more, don't show your teeth, let your hair out, don't use too much makeup, don't use too much hair product, use some makeup, open your eyes more, trim your eyebrow, a bit more flirty look. We did this to support each other. And we tried to. When transphobic people attack us for repeating patriarchal standards of appearances, we all roll our eyes because we think they're dumb. And they are. But they see something. They see a phenomenon. They just can't pinpoint the source because they're transphobic and they don't think about that. They see trans women repeating stereotypical ideals of what women should look like. But it's not because we want to do those things. It's not because we want to embody something. It's because it's a survival technique. We have to do that in order to get just the most basic kind of respect there is, because if we don't, we aren't respected at all. We repeat stereotypes because that's what we've been told to do by friends, family, doctors, society, in some cases even the actual laws that we have to abide by. We don't really have a choice, and sometimes we hear it from other trans people. And that last one, that stings. How to pass as a woman. To answer this question, I have had to slog through a lot of background, my own opinions, the opinions of some friends that I've reached out to make this video. The answer, if you want to pass as a woman, you can't. And you already are. And you always have. And you never will. In theory, the term passing works. In theory, we can discuss terms like identity and appearance and passing in a very clean, effective way. But in practice, it doesn't work like that. Real life is messy in a way that we can't really comprehend. Passing as a term doesn't really fit that well into real life. It's a nice academic term. It's a nice term to use in a theoretical way, but in practice, it kind of falls apart. I can't answer that question. How to pass as a woman, how to present yourself as a woman. I can't answer that question. No one can. The very nature of the question either defies definition or has been part of the human anguish since we first looked into pond water to see our reflection and started to ask, who am I really? I want to pass. The term is, as I talked about, almost useless, but everyone knows what you mean when you say it. I also want to pass. Wanting to avoid transphobia by not looking trans is very understandable, but they're not actions that we do for ourselves. They are reactions that we do in order to cope with how society treats us. That's not us living our inner truth. That is us compromising with society in order to survive. Passing is a concession, a compromise. They are concessions to people who dictate how our lives should be. They aren't empowering if they are made under duress, but they are understandable. As I said, I still want to pass. Despite everything. Despite me hating the term, despite me hating everything connected to the term, despite me hating the concept, and despite knowing that it's not who I am, I still want to do it. That is why I become very worried when I see other trans people use the term as aspirational, as a goal to be pursued, and not just for themselves, but for all trans people. Saying that in the ideal world, all trans people pass. But I don't know what they mean by that. Does that mean that passing as a term has become irrelevant? Or does it mean that we all fit into the norm of mainstream society? If you want to pass only for yourself, that's great. But I don't know how to do that. I can't divorce my own feelings from the pressures that I have received from society over the last 25 years on how women should be. A couple of months ago, I got a surgery time for bottom surgery. And the second I read the time, I had a panic attack. There wasn't anything specific about the date, but just the surgery time. Fairly routine. And I cried for days. I still don't know if I want it. I don't know if I want bottom surgery. After 6 years, I'm not that sure. When I began my transition, My doctor basically told me that I had to want everything. That he would not be convinced I was a woman unless I said that I wanted the entire package. I had to say that I wanted everything. The entire package. The vagina, the hormone treatments, the voice training, everything. And if I didn't want everything, I would get nothing. So I lied and I said that, yeah, of course I want surgery. Of course I want all the surgeries. I want everything. I want to be the perfect 1950s housewife. And 6 years later, I never really got the chance to reflect if that's what I really wanted. I never got to think about whether it was true. I just know that it had to be true. I had to want that, because if I didn't, I would get nothing. And now, I don't know. When I see cis people say that we should pass, I can explain away that. They're ignorant. They don't know any better. They're tactless. But when trans people say it, I feel like I failed. When trans people say that I should pass, or that I should try to pass, or even that I do pass, I feel either like I have failed or that I'm lying. And that hurts. As you can hear, I have a complicated relationship to passing. Even though I want to toss the term away into the dumpster fire of bad words, there is no other word that accurately describes the feeling of wanting to be something as close as you can, while not actually being that. I don't want to pass as a woman, I am a woman, and I want that to be true in a way that is physically impossible. Because of the norms that have been drilled into me since I was born of how a woman should be. But passing is still a useful word. We can still use it. But we also need to discuss the negative effects that keeping the word and the discourse that surrounds it would entail. I don't know how to pass. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Most times I don't. I don't know how important passing is when it comes to your identity. I can't tell you that. I can't tell that for myself either. I don't know the role passing and appearances play when it comes to your identity. I don't know how that applies to me or to you. I mean, I want to pass. And we as a community, we keep talking about passing. I just want to escape it. I feel like whenever we talk about presentation or initial impressions or passing as a concept, whenever we talk about that as a community, I feel like it's more weight being put on my shoulders. And I feel sick when trans people tell me to embrace that weight instead of criticizing why the weight exists at all. And I'm lucky, because sometimes I pass. By most definitions, I'm also pretty. And I hate myself. Because I don't pass all the time. For everyone. Everywhere. Some days I'm going to look very trans. Most days. But I'm not allowed. Because if I don't pass, I have failed. If I'm with a partner, I'm putting them in a shameful position too. They might not care, but society does. I'm still gonna look like me. But me, more often than not, looks like a trans woman. And that's fine. Except when it isn't. I never think about this, about other trans people. I don't think you should. I think this way of thinking is harmful and awful and horrible. But I know cis people do. They think of us like this. And I know it about myself. I do this to myself all the time. I don't want this video to be an entry into the conversation whether or not passing is important or not. This video is more a criticism towards the question itself. How to pass as a woman? There is no answer. because the question is fundamentally wrong. And I'm sick of hearing trans people reinforce this way of thinking about ourselves, this awful way of reflecting on our own worth. And if someone does talk about it in that context, to want to separate themselves from it, we all feel bad. We all feel awful because so many of us think this way about ourselves, but we don't talk about it. Instead, we're just stuck in this status quo between passing or not passing. Either we win or we lose. In the trans discourse, trying to be part of the mainstream world, we aren't allowed to just be. I wish I could be proud. I wish beyond anything that I could take pride in looking and sounding trans. But I can't. And I wish I had a happy end to this video where I could talk about me finding some comfort in all of this, in my own experience, which I talk about a lot in this video, but I don't. The truth is, I'm going to, when this video is over, go down in the comments and I'm going to look for people telling me that I'm beautiful, for people telling me that I pass. And I'm also going to see people telling me that I sound and look like a man. And I'm going to place a lot of value in those comments. I wish I didn't, but I will. I know I will. I think that sometimes you just need to say, with some explanation, that the question is bad. The topic is bad. And sometimes that sounds sad. And sometimes that is sad. And that's actually fine. It's actually fine. I'm fine. It sucks. But yeah. Thank you for watching this video. I had a really intense time making it, so if you liked it, I would really appreciate you if you told me in the comments and maybe subscribed to my channel, because I'm really close to 5,000 subscribers and I would really like to be that, so I can feel valid. I like when the internet number goes up. I want to give a big thanks to all my patrons who helped make this video our reality, but I want to give a special thanks to Rosie, Kim, Ibrahim Aldridge, Wario Van Pebbles, Alice, Ryan Kolak, Zindri, I'm not good with names, Emma, not Goldman, Emil Drotovsky, Dan Sinfield, Amelia Fletcher, Xbox, Linus 2.0, William Pietri, Christopher Steinmuller, and of course you for watching this very emotional video that I made. Thank you. Thank you so much. If you like this video, you should join all of these people on the list that are scrolling by on Patreon. It's nice. I do things. Okay, bye. I just realized I have so many patrons now that I feel like I need to organize you all alphabetically so that you can find yourselves, because there's so many of you. Like every time I make a video and I type in all your names, I'm always so grateful and stunned to have you all here, and there's so many of you now, and I just want to make sure that I just want you all to feel seen, and I want you all to know that I see you, and I love you so much.